Welcome back to my channel. And today's scary story comes from a Reddit user. This is the Babysitters answering machine. It was 1996, and I was a high school junior babysitting for extra cash. One of my regular families had a baby that I often watched. The parents would come back from their evening out, give me the key to their answering machine so I could screen calls and then leave. Their home was nice, 2 stories with a living room, dining room, and kitchen on the bottom floor, and the baby's room was upstairs. There was also a door at the top of the stairs that led outside. As the evening progressed, I was watching TV downstairs with the baby in his or her crib across the room. I don't remember what time it was, but it was definitely before the parents were due back. The phone on the kitchen counter rang and I walked over to pick up the receiver. It was the answering machine. I pressed the button to record and this is what happened. A whispering voice said, "Don't look upstairs." Then the line went dead. I was freaked out sitting there in the kitchen with the receiver in my hand, not knowing who had called. The baby was making noises. So I went over to the crib and started to rock him or her and shush her until she fell asleep. After a bit, the phone rang again, and I let the answering machine pick up. The same whispering voice said, "You shouldn't be down there." Again, the line went dead. Now, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. All I could think about was getting the parents home as fast as possible. I grabbed the cordless phone and dialed their number. Thankfully, they weren't too far away, and they rushed home. When they got there, I told them about the weird phone calls, and we checked the answering machine for the messages. But when they hit play, all they heard was a dial tone. At first, they thought it was a prank call and just left again. But I insisted that they listen to the message again, so they did. This time the parents heard the whispering voice too. So here's what we think happened. There was a very sick individual out there who was targeting babysitters. He or she would call and try to scare them. It worked. Then the perpetrator would follow the babysitter. Every move by looking through the windows and speaking into the answering machine. They knew exactly where the babysitter was. They could see her. They were watching her. They wanted her to be scared. To this day, I have no idea how someone could get so much pleasure out of watching a teenage girl babysit. While listening to her through an answering machine, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, the creepiest part is that the parents never received any other calls like that. Nor did I ever experience anything like it again. Hey, I just saved a life. Do you know someone who needs to hear this story? Tell them about scary stories. You can find us on social media. Please like and share. Thanks for watching. I don't know about you guys, but if I was exploring an abandoned subway tunnel and this happened, I would turn tail and run like heck. But hey, some people are just built different. In 2003, a group of ghost hunters in New York City decided to explore the Worth Street subway tunnel, which had been closed off to the public since 1948, according to reports. The station was shut down due to a lack of use, being sandwiched between 2 other stations only a few blocks away. You know, if you're going to abandon a subway station, why not just mothball it until things pick back up again? I mean, it's not like you're going to lose any customers by keeping it closed. Just reopen it, slap some fresh coat paint on it, and make it look nice. People will come back eventually. But anyway, this led to the place becoming a bit of a local legend, with rumors of strange occurrences happening within its 4 walls. Naturally, the ghost hunters thought they'd check it out, specifically at around midnight, when the spirits were said to be most active. As they descended into the station, they began hearing strange sounds, dripping water and distant footsteps. Then they picked up what sounded like the laughter of a child. Now you might think that a rational explanation could be offered for all of these supposed paranormal happenings. Maybe someone was messing around, making the whole thing up to seem scarier than it really was. And then someone else could have easily explained the footsteps or the dripping water. But then, the audio would have to include this clip that was also picked up by the ghost hunters. As they round the corner into another part of the tunnel, you can hear one of the group members ask, "Can you hear that?" Another responds, "Yeah," before the voice of a child can be heard saying, "Don't go to the end." The ghost hunters came to a stop, unsure of what to do next. Then seconds later, one of them swore that something pulled on her scarf. To prove it, she turned around, but of course there was nothing there. And at that moment, they made the executive decision to nope out of there. Now, there is one other possibility I haven't ruled out, and that's the very real chance that this is completely staged. I mean, it makes sense. Why wouldn't it? When it comes to YouTube videos, even if they're fake though, there's no denying that they're still entertaining as hell to watch. Now, I don't know where they got their info from, but according to them, the Worth Street subway tunnel is now open once again. So if any of you New York City folk want to go down there and check it out for yourselves, now's your chance. But I would wait a while first, because who knows what kind of damage Hurricane Sandy did to the place. It would not be a good time to go exploring down there if there's loose, bricks falling from the ceiling or something. Wait till the coast is clear, just to be safe. If you're ever going to explore an abandoned building, make sure you bring along some friends and maybe some professional help, because you never know what you stumble across down there. Even if it is just some old subway tunnels, it doesn't sound fun to me. But hey, everyone's got their own hobbies. So I'll end this video by asking you, would you ever go exploring in an abandoned subway tunnel? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then stick around and follow for more updates. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day. Another creepy baby monitor story. This one comes from 2019. It's from a mother from New Jersey. And this is what she experienced. I was getting ready for bed, and I heard my baby monitor. I thought I heard static, so I went to go check on my daughter, because sometimes when we're watching her, there will be static, and then it goes away. But I looked over and I saw that the monitor was not on, and there was a male voice saying, "Let me in, please. I'm cold." That's all I heard. And I immediately started screaming because the baby was in her crib, and I was right outside the door. We have a baby monitor with a camera attached to it. She has one on each side of the room. I have a baby monitor in my room, and then there's another one that's hooked up to my phone. It's just so that if I'm around the house, I can hear her at any given moment. That one was on silent. The one in our room was off. It was completely off. I don't know why I didn't think to look at my phone first. But I went to go check the baby, and I noticed that the camera that was facing the crib was not on. The other one was on, and it showed my husband and I in the room, so that was still recording. The one that was by the crib, that camera was not on like it normally is. There was no movement in the crib, and my baby was in my arms. So I immediately ran and picked her up and started screaming, and my husband came running in because he heard me. He was brushing his teeth, and he immediately looked at the camera, and he turned it on, and there was nothing there. He looked everywhere, even looked outside the window. We live in a second-story apartment, and our window is about, maybe if you stretch, maybe 4 feet. It's very small. There's no way anyone could have climbed in. The window was shut. There was no one outside. We looked out the window, and there was no one there. And then we went back and we checked the recording. That's when we heard the voice say, "You let me out." It was literally a whisper. It wasn't even loud. It was a raspy whisper. It definitely sounded like a man. My baby is an extremely good sleeper. Like, she sleeps through the night. She hardly ever wakes up. And that night, she slept through it. She did not wake up once, which is very uncharacteristic of her. And then about 2 weeks later, I was going through the recordings because they'd stay on the device for about a week before they'd kind of cycle through. And I noticed that the voice that same day, there was a different recording of him saying, "You let me out." And that was the only thing. Those are the only 2 times that happened, as rightfully so. That is terrifying. Hearing a voice on the baby monitor saying, "Let me in," that would freak anyone out. And then to go back later and see that it says, "You let me out?" Yeah, rightfully so. That's terrifying. What do you think happened in this situation? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. That really helps us out a lot. Subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to hear more creepypasta stories, check out the playlist in the description or in the card above. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, and we'll see you next time. My chilling voicemail story comes from Susan Schuler from Texas. She kept a voicemail message from her son as he was deployed overseas. He would call every week to say goodbye, and that's what she had programmed the auto dialer to do, to say goodbye. But one night the message auto played, and it wasn't her son's usual goodbye message. No, this time the voice on the other end of the line said, "They buried me where they couldn't find me." So, this poor woman, she calls the military, and they tell her, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a prank call. We'll look into it." And then they hang up on her. So she keeps calling them back, and they keep telling her, No, don't worry, we've got this." And then finally they tell her, "Yeah, we found him. He's been taken care of." And she's like, "Taken care of? What does that mean? Did they find him? Did they get the people that did this?" To make a long story short, the military told her that her son was missing in action. This was not part of their plan. The family had not been told that he was missing in action. They had no idea that was even a possibility. And so they were very confused when they got the call saying that he was, in fact, missing in action. And then they also told her that his body had been recovered, but they didn't tell her where the body had been recovered or why it had taken them so long to find it. All they would say was that, we're still looking into things and it's just going to take some time. That was really hard for the family. They wanted to bury him, as soon as possible. They wanted to have a funeral. They wanted to be able to move forward with their lives. And the military was really dragging their feet. Finally, after a lot of back and forth and a lot of fighting with the military, they were able to get the body and they were able to have a proper burial for the young man. It was many, many months after they had originally found his body. But here's the thing. When they went to go identify the body, the family noticed that the body was not bruised or beaten or anything like that. There was no way of telling how this young man died. The military told them that he was killed in action by enemy fire. But the family did int by that for a second, because if he had been killed by enemy fire, there would have been, at least some kind of mark on his body. There would have been some shrapnel, maybe some bullet wounds. There was nothing. The body was in perfect condition. It was almost like he had died. And then they put his body in a body bag and left him somewhere. That's what the family thinks happened. The military never did tell them exactly how he died or where he died or why he was left where he was found. I can only imagine the nightmarish scenario of being buried alive. If you were in the military and something happened and you were in a situation where you thought you were gone, not die, would you rather the other side just kill you right then and there? Or would you rather be buried alive? Let me know in the comments below. Now, as far as the case goes, they never did find out 100% what happened. The family still believes that he was put in that body bag while he was still alive. But the military never did come forward with any more information. And to this day, they don't know 100% what happened to him. That was my chilling voicemail story, and now it's time for bed. But before we go, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Like this video. 2. Subscribe if you haven't already. 3. Check out this video. See you over there. This terrifying camping discovery will make you never enter the woods again. In 2022, a group of teenagers from Oregon were just hiking near an abandoned ranger station when they came across something terrifying. It was an old phone booth. Now, this may not seem too scary, but there was absolutely no reason for it to be there. And if that didn't freak them out enough, when they peered inside, there was a disconnected black rotary phone on the wall, and the glass had been smashed. Whoever had used this last had done so with great force. But what really freaked these guys out was that the phone booth was completely dead. There were no cables attached to it, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that there was a small gap between the wall and the phone booth itself. And through that gap they could hear a noise. They thought maybe it was coming from inside the booth. So they got closer, and that's when they heard it. It was a woman's voice. They couldn't see inside, but they could hear what sounded like a woman's voice saying, "You're standing where I died." That line was not spoken by anyone present. It should be noted that the friends had brought a video camera with them, but they only turned it on once they were back at the car. But when they listened to the audio, that's when they heard the voice. The group of friends were understandably freaked out by the whole thing. No one wanted to go anywhere near that phone booth. Now, some people might have just decided to move on from this point, right? Just decide that it was probably some sort of cruel joke played by some bored teenagers. But this group decided to stick around until they got to the bottom of this. They decided to play along. And just to be clear, none of these people have returned to that phone booth ever again. After doing some research, it turns out that there had been a ranger station at that very location, but it had been abandoned a long time ago. And because of that, all records of it had been lost to time. What made this even stranger was that no one seemed to remember a woman dying there, or even a woman working there. So these guys had found something truly unique. But there was still that one big question that needed to be answered. Who was the woman, and how did she die? The answer to that second question was pretty easy. After looking through some old newspaper clippings, they found that a woman had died there in a freak electrical accident. She had been the station manager, and one night she had been taking a late-night shower when the water had turned cold. When she went to investigate, she must have come into contact with a live wire and was electrocuted. Her body was never recovered, though, because the power was cut to the station immediately, and when the workers arrived the next morning, they found the station completely deserted. They assumed that she must have taken her own life and left. No one even bothered to look for her body. As for the first question, we don't have an answer for that. We don't know if the spirit is still there or who exactly it was that they encountered. All we do know is that none of them have ever gone back. Now watch. Terrifying camping discoveries that will make you never enter the woods again, or check out. Most dangerous camping mistakes that can get you killed. This is a paranormal podcast. One time during a live episode, I received an email from someone who wanted to remain anonymous. They said they had an EVP they wanted me to listen to, and I'm paraphrasing here. It said, "You may want to hear this one with headphones in. It's short and to the point. Listen for the scratching sounds and then the voice that follows. The scratching is my cat and then my friend's voice. We were sitting together listening to one of your episodes when she heard it. She was the one who suggested sending it to you. I opened the attachment and listened to it with headphones on. It was just under a minute long. I played it back, and all I could hear was some light static and what sounded like a female voice whispering very faintly in the background. I couldn't understand what she was saying, and it wasn't very clear. Then about 20 seconds into the recording, I distinctly heard a male voice say, 'I never left the attic.' Immediately after he said that, the audio cut out and the recording ended. I was pretty sure that I heard what I thought I heard. I wasn't sure if it was some kind of joke or if it was something more sinister. I decided to air it during an episode the next week, which we do. We take listener voicemails and emails, and sometimes we'll play them on the air. Sometimes people will send in stories, sometimes they'll send in EVPs. So I read the email to my co-host, and then I played the recording. My co-host and I talked about it a little bit afterwards. And then I told the story of a local woman who went missing while visiting the town that we were in. She disappeared in the early 90s and her body has never been found. Her family believes that she was murdered by one of the tenants of the boarding house that she was staying at, and that the killer stuffed her body into the attic space above the garage where the killer lived. The attic was accessible only by a ladder that could be pulled down from the ceiling. When the police searched the attic space, there was no sign of a struggle and there was no body. The tenant claimed that he had nothing to do with the woman's disappearance, and he even agreed to let the police tear down the boarding house to search for her remains. Nothing was ever found. The case went cold, and the killer was never found. I don't know if this is relevant, but I've always wondered if maybe whoever did this had something to do with the fact that the lady went missing. I asked my co-host if she thought it was a prank call. She said that she did because the person who sent it in clearly stated that the scratching was their cat and then their friend S voice. There was no way that someone would go through all of that to fake an EVP, especially since they risked exposing themselves by stating their name. So we aired the EVP and we moved on. 10 minutes into the show, we started getting messages from people saying that they were hearing a second voice layered behind the whisper that says, "I never left the attic." At first, they were saying that they heard their own names being whispered. Then they started saying that they were hearing the name of our show. I immediately ended the live feed and I called the station to have them pull the episode. As soon as they pulled the episode, the audio file was gone. It was like it was never recorded in the first place. Nobody else has ever heard it and has never been on any of our social media accounts. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I figured it might. We have a ton of old episodes stored on a server, and I went through every single one of them, and I couldn't find that one. It's like it was never recorded. If you want to hear more stories like this, follow for more content. Also, please feel free to share your story with us at the email provided below. And now, Unsolved Mysteries. It was the year 1990 and the location was Orrington, Maine. That's a small town of about 8,000 people in the county of Hancock. Orrington is located about 20 minutes southwest of Bangor. In case you've been wondering where all the crazy stuff happens in Maine, it's generally around Bangor. But back to the year 1990, when something strange happened at the local elementary school. The staff and students were getting ready for the holidays, and they decided to open up the school's time capsule. This was a tradition that the school had started back in 1965. It was common back then for schools to have time capsules where kids would put things in the capsule that they liked. Things that were popular. Things that described their lives in hopes that future generations would understand what life was like in their time. These items were then sealed away to be opened up in a future year. And in 1990, the time capsule from 1965 was opened. Among the contents were lots of interesting things like drawings and letters. But there was also an old reel-to-reel tape inside. So they found this tape and they played it. What they heard was some music, old recordings of the students singing the school song. Everything was fine until midway through the tape when the children all scream in unison. Then just as suddenly, the screaming stops and a single faint voice is heard saying, "We are still down here." Then the tape ends. There was no explanation for this. Whatever it was that they heard, it freaked them out. It never played the tape again, and nobody ever went into the basement where the time capsule was stored. They just locked the basement off and renovated the building. Nobody knows what happened to the tape either. So why would these kids be screaming and then say that they're down here? Was this a creepy message from the future? If so, who put the tape in the capsule and why? And if it wasn't a warning of some kind, what was it? Was it perhaps a prank by someone who was messing with the kids? Or maybe the whole thing was misconstrued. Maybe the kids were just singing and playing and someone thought it sounded like a scream. Then maybe the last kid said something like, "We're down here," in reference to the basement where the time capsule was kept. Maybe it really is as mundane as that. But whatever happened, the school never found out. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this story is definitely creepy. I mean, what else would you call it when a bunch of kids are screaming, and then one says that they re-trapped down here? To me, it sounds like a horror movie. I guess part of what makes this story so creepy is that we don't know what happened. We don't know why those kids were screaming. There's just too many unanswered questions. So what do you think happened? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoy scary stories, then check out my podcast. New episodes are released every week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Stories like this really creep me out. So let's get right into it. This happened back in 1978 in Louisiana. A man was sitting on death row for a crime he insisted he didn't commit. There was very little evidence against him, but the state of Louisiana didn't care. The weeks leading up to his execution, he started hearing voices. At first, they were just background static, but then they started speaking to him directly. He told the guards that there were voices in his prison cell telling him to escape, and that if he did, they would kill him. Of course, the guards didn't believe him and just chalked it up to another death row inmate trying to get some extra attention. But then the voices started speaking to him about his childhood, things he had never told anyone, not even his family. This is when the guards started getting a little nervous. Maybe this guy really was innocent. Maybe there really were voices in the cell. They decided to keep a close eye on him and listen in on his conversations with these voices. But the only way they could do this without violating his rights was to hide a recording device in his cell. This is where the story gets really creepy. A few days later, while listening to the playback, they heard what sounded like two voices in the cell with him. Then, of course, they heard the inmate begin whispering back. The guards reported that when they listened to the tape, it was clear that the inmate was talking to someone or something in his cell. And the voice on the other side of the conversation wasn't that of a person, but instead, something inhuman. It seemed as if the voice was coming from outside the cell. The two voices spoke to each other like old friends catching up after a long time. One of the voices was definitely the inmate's. The other sounded like a raspy whisper. Despite the fact that the tape was being played back at regular speed, the whisper was almost unintelligible. After listening to the tape, the guards reported that it was obvious there was more to the story than they had been led to believe. What the inmate was saying was too intimate, too personal, to just be made up. The guards knew that whatever was going on in that cell, they were dealing with something they did not understand. Now, the prison was built way back in 1831, and it was said to be haunted by several ghosts. Over the years, many prisoners claimed that they heard disembodied voices, footsteps and screams in the middle of the night. Some even claimed to have seen apparitions walking the halls. But those stories are for another video. For now, we'll focus on the voice in the prison cell. The inmate had originally claimed that the voice had told him to escape, but after listening to the recording, it seemed as though the inmate was planning on doing anything but escaping. In fact, the inmate seemed quite happy about his impending demise, almost as if he was looking forward to it. But why? According to the prison records, the inmate spoke of a great darkness that was enveloping him, and in that darkness he found peace. He said the voices told him he'd be safe in the darkness, and that someone would be waiting for him there. Someone, or something, the inmate didn't know. All he knew was that the voices promised him sweet oblivion. On the day of his execution, the prison chaplain asked if he would like to make one final statement. Instead of saying a prayer or asking for forgiveness, The inmate leaned over and whispered something into the wall of his cell. As soon as he did, the prison went into lockdown. No one was allowed to enter or exit the prison. No one was even allowed to leave their post. The guards stood by their posts, listening intently to the wall. They strained to hear what the inmate had whispered, but they couldn't make anything out. It sounded like gibberish. Then one of the guards had a brilliant idea. He pulled out a handheld tape recorder and held it up to the wall. What he heard sent chills down his spine. As the other guard played back the recording, the warden and several other prison officials stood in a tight circle listening intently. When it was over, the room was silent. Everyone was staring at the floor. Finally, the warden broke the silence. "Let's move the execution time up a few hours," he said. No one objected. When the inmate was led out of his cell for the last time, he was calm and serene. As he walked to his death, he turned to the guards and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm not dangerous." Then he turned to the wall and whispered, "Goodbye, my friend. I'll see you again soon." The guards stood by the wall and listened intently, but all they heard was the hum of the air conditioning. The inmate was led away and executed. The recording of his whispered goodbye was locked up in a safe. To this day, no one is allowed to listen to it, so I guess we'll never know what that inmate whispered to the wall that day. Do you think it was a goodbye message to the ghost in his cell? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and join us next time for more creepypasta stories. I found this story so fascinating. I hope you enjoy it too. It's about a church choir that wasn't there. It was 2011 and a pastor named Ron was working at a church in Alabama. This church had been built way back in 1954, so you could imagine it was pretty old, but there was something special about it. See, the acoustics were amazing. Despite being nearly 60 years old, its sound system was so good that people from all over the country would come to record their music there. But unfortunately, the church was abandoned, and so Ron decided to make use of the opportunity. He wanted to test out the mic and the recording equipment to see if it was still in working order. So he set up a mic in the middle of the sanctuary and began to speak into it. He talked for a few minutes about how great the acoustics were and how alive the place still felt. Then he turned off the recorder and left. He came back a few hours later to listen to what he had recorded. But when he pressed play, instead of hearing his own voice, he heard a full gospel choir singing in perfect harmony. They were praising the Lord, and their voices echoed throughout the old church, just like they had in years past. Now, Ron wasn't sure what to make of it. At first, he thought it was a joke. Maybe someone had put the recording there to mess with him. But he knew that no one had been inside the church for at least 23 years. Not since Hurricane Katrina destroyed the roof and chased everyone out. And then it hit him. This must be the work of the Holy Spirit. You see, Ron wasn't just an ordinary pastor. He was a man who believed in miracles. And in his faith, he knew that the Spirit of God could move through sound. You see, sound has the ability to transcend time and space. When you hear a sound, you're actually hearing the echoes of vibrations that happened in the past. Take, for example, the sound of thunder. When you hear thunder, you're actually hearing the sound of lightning that happened a split second ago. Light travels so fast that we don't notice the delay, but sound is much slower, so we hear the clap of thunder after we see the flash of lightning. Now, if you could somehow speed up these vibrations and make them travel faster, then you could hear sounds that happened in the distant past. In a way, this is what Ron experienced when he heard the choir. Their voices were vibrating through the air, just like they had done all those years ago. And he was able to hear them because their frequency was finally moving at a speed that he could perceive. Of course, this is just one interpretation of what happened. Others might say that it was just a coincidence, that the recording somehow picked up ambient noise from outside, or maybe there was a group of teenagers messing around in the old church. But to Ron, this was a miracle. Saw it as a sign that God was still working in that place and that the spirit of music was still alive. Sadly, the file got corrupted and can't be recovered. So we'll never know for sure what happened that day. But one thing is certain, the music that filled that old church was truly something special, whether it came from this world or the next. If you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends. Also, if you've ever experienced anything strange or unexplained, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for watching. One night, a girl from Utah was awoken by a voice in her sleep. Now, this wasn't an unusual occurrence for the young woman, as she often talked in her sleep. But what made this particular night different was that the voice wasn't her own, and whatever had woken her up wasn't in her room. It all started back in 2018 when the unidentified college student downloaded popular sleep tracking app onto her smartphone.
Oh.
The app recorded sounds throughout the night and woke the user if it detected any disturbances. One morning after using the app, the woman discovered a recording from the night before. It was a 12-second file of her saying, "Who are you?" in her sleep. What made this particularly strange was that no one had been in her room. She lived alone. Of course, she deleted the app immediately, assuming that it was some kind of glitch. But the next morning, she found the same recording again. This time it was longer, and it included a deep male voice that said, "You invited me." Naturally, she deleted the app again, but to no avail. The files kept reappearing, and so began the terrifying ordeal of the sleep-talking ghost. At first, the recordings were just strange. They were full of unintelligible mumbling until that fateful night when the woman clearly said, "Who are you?" The entity replied, "You invited me." From that point on, things took a turn for the worse. The recordings grew longer and more frequent. Sometimes they would wake the woman up in the middle of the night, and other times they would continue on after she had woken up. Some recordings lasted only a few seconds, while others went on for more than an hour. And although most of the recordings were just static and unintelligible mumbling, occasionally the woman would hear what sounded like footsteps pacing back and forth in her room. The woman even tried switching rooms, but the sleep-talking continued. She then moved in with her boyfriend, and the sleep-talking stopped for a whole week. Then out of nowhere, it started up again. The woman was understandably freaked out by this point and took matters into her own hands. She bought an expensive microphone to use as a digital recorder, but that didn't work. She then tried covering her mouth with a towel while she slept, which stopped the sleep-talking for a while. But it came back with a vengeance after she stopped doing that. So now, let's explore some possible explanations for this haunting. First off, let's consider the possibility that there really is a ghost in the woman's apartment. After all, she did move rooms and even moved in with her boyfriend for a while, and the sleep-talking followed her. This would suggest that it's not her imagination, but something actually haunting her. But what about the male voice? Is it really the ghost of some dude that's trying to communicate with her? Maybe. But the fact that the voice seems to be coming from the recording itself, rather than actually being in the room with her, suggests that it might be something else. For example, it could be that the recordings themselves are somehow cursed or haunted. Or perhaps there is some kind of glitch in the app or device that is causing these strange phenomena. Another possibility is that this is all in the woman's head, so to speak. Perhaps she is subconsciously creating these recordings as a form of self-expression, or perhaps they are a symptom of some kind of mental illness. This is supported by the fact that the woman has no memory of making these recordings, and they only seem to occur when she is sleeping. In the end, we may never know for sure what is going on in this case. The sleep-talking ghost remains one of the many unsolved mysteries of the paranormal. What do you think is behind the Utah woman's terrifying sleep-talking ghost? Let us know your thoughts. And if you'd like to learn more about similar strange occurrences, stay tuned for more updates. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.